In this edition of Art Rocks, a new edition celebrates a comedy masterpiece.
We thought the 35th anniversary was a wonderful opportunity to redesign the book, have a new look, a new take on Ignatius.
The lesser-known side of film luminary David Lynch.
And for me, it was born out of painting.
A photographer recalls how she fell for photos.
There's a time where your brain starts working differently. You start to see all those things that you were missing before.
And get a behind-the-scenes look at a comic strip dynasty.
Growing up reading that, feeling like it's part of my family, because it is part of my family.
It's all ahead on this edition of Art Rocks.
Art Rocks is made possible by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and by viewers like you.
Hello, I'm James Fox Smith, publisher of Country Roads magazine, and this is Art Rocks. It's been 35 years since the Pulitzer Prize-winning comic novel A Confederacy of Dunces was published. Since then, the book has been translated into over 27 languages and it's never been out of print. With over 3.5 million copies sold, it's been a success story for LSU Press. Let's see what they have in store for the 35th anniversary.
You know, I think this book took everyone by surprise because when it was published, the first printing was a fairly modest 1,500 copies. They thought that it would, have a nice reaction locally and that would probably be it. But instead, this book became popular all across the United States. It was hand sold. Everyone read it, thought it was wonderful, and told their friends, you have to read this book, and it kind of went from there. But beyond that, this book has really been embraced around the world. So it's been translated into over 35 languages, everything from Hebrew to French, German, Japanese, and when you think about it, that's unusual for a book that is so regionally based. This book really is about New Orleans. There's New Orleans dialect, there are New Orleans places, there's New Orleans food, and yet there are things in this book that can apply to any culture, anybody, anywhere. The cover for the original 1980 edition is iconic. Everybody recognizes it. But for a new generation, it does look a little dated. So we thought the 35th anniversary was a wonderful opportunity to redesign of the book, have a new look, a new take on Ignatius, and we hope that that will appeal to a new generation of readers.
The novel won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 1981, awarded posthumously to the author John Kennedy Toole, whose suicide occurred over a decade earlier. The work might have gone unnoticed if not for the efforts of the author's mother, Thelma Toole, whose sheer persistence brought the manuscript to the attention of Southern writer Walker Percy, who then guided the novel to the LSU Press. The book has become a cult classic, still showing up on top 10 lists after 35 years, considered the best depiction of New Orleans characters and dialect. The novel's anti-hero, Ignatius J. Riley, is commemorated with a statue on Canal Street. New Orleans is a town famous for its food, so fans of the novel will be happy to learn about another publication of the LSU Press, A Confederacy of Dunces cookbook, recipes from Ignatius J. Riley's New Orleans.
You are going to actually laugh at this cookbook because I've taken lots of quotes from the novel that pertain to food and I put them in the book and then I created recipes that go with the quotes. My favorite quote is by Ignatius, and he says, "Whenever I tire of my literary endeavors, I make an occasional cheese dip." And to me that one sentence describes Ignatius and the way that he looked at his writing in his journal. He wasn't really that serious about it. To him, food was pretty much the most important thing in his life. Most of the recipes are mine, but I did get some from some chefs in New Orleans. And I found someone, as it turns out, who actually lived next to Thelma Toole after John Kennedy Toole passed away. That's when Thelma was living with her brother. and he said that they would send bananas over to the tool house, and what would come back would be banana bread. So I made a banana bread recipe and I put that in there. I did try and make it a companion to the novel to explain a lot of different scenarios. Like, I explained what the Britannia Theater was and what Fazio's bowling alley is, because this novel sold millions of copies worldwide. So someone in France or Belgium is not going to know what Fazio's, or if a Saint Odo of Cluny Parish really exists, if it does, and it does not. I had to look up what a pyloric valve was. I didn't know we all had one of those either, but I put that in the book. We do. The novel itself was written in the 1960s, and when I first started reading it, I thought, wow, most of the people who are going to read this or who read the novel right now don't remember what New Orleans was in the 1960s. It was a very different city. As you recall, the novel starts out at D.H. Holmes, which is not there anymore. And at the time, Canal Street was a spectacular place for shopping. So I devote the first chapter to describing what Canal Street was like in the 1960s. And then the food for that chapter is a lot of food that was served at the old D.H. Holmes cafeteria. But then throughout the book, for each chapter, I put dishes mostly as they were made in the 1960s, because I don't want us to forget what a Russian cake was, or what oyster patties were, or what daube was.
For more information, get thee to lsupress.org. Now, let's take a look at some of Louisiana's arts and cultural events in the coming week. For more information on these events, visit the website at lpb.org/artrocks. And for more arts activities, check out countryroadsmag.com. Next, let's sit down with the critically acclaimed film director David Lynch. On display are his first creative projects, and what might come as a surprise is that they are not his films. We'll take a look at what first inspired this luminary of the cinematic arts.
The traces of Philadelphia in his work are, you can't unwind or pull anything apart without Philadelphia poking up.
I haven't seen some of these paintings that are in the show since the 60s. When I went around looking at the show upstairs, I got ideas. So I think it's good to look back sometimes. I always say Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is my biggest influence. There's something about the mood here. There was dark carved wood banisters and stairways. There was a certain type of green that they would paint the rooms, either white or this strange green. The rooms had nice proportions. So there was a certain kind of purity. It hadn't been disturbed, except by the soot.
It wasn't any one particular thing or scene that you witnessed here. It was the mood, and is what some of the images did when they got down inside of you.
Yeah, Philadelphia is percolating in me.
The Unified Field is the first museum exhibition of David Lynch's paintings and drawings ever. It's the largest survey that's ever been on view in an American museum, and it's the first.
Back in 1965, and I want to...
He's also an internationally known film director and writer, and he has been nominated for Academy Awards. Pretty much a celebrity. He's known throughout the entire world as a film director, but David Lynch is at heart a painter.
I only wanted to be a painter. I got into film by accident in this very building, in one of the studios right over here. The first film I ever made is now being shown here as it was when I made it. And it was projected in this room, almost just to the right of where you're sitting, on a 16mm projector. And then I had a tape recorder with a loop of Siren, and it was played right here.
One of the things I'm most proud of about this exhibition is that we are presenting Six Men Getting Sick, which Lynch did in 1967 for the first time since 1967. Where David Lynch begins, to me, as somebody who's making work that is uniquely his own, is with Six Men Getting Sick. It's that piece that he made as his entry into the second annual experimental painting and sculpture competition that was held at PAFA. Lynch, who is an advanced painting student at PAFA, didn't produce a painting, but based on an experience he had in his studio one night, he was painting an image of green garden plants at night. It was a nocturnal scene. He paused, and then from the painting came a wind that he heard and he felt, and then he saw the plants start to move on the canvas, and he thought, oh, a moving painting. And he stresses that he wasn't on drugs. You know, this is the late 60s, and everybody wants to know, was David Lynch taking drugs? But all of his friends, and he sort of asserts that he was pretty much straight as an arrow. Not having had any film training whatsoever, there was no film program at PAFA, there wasn't even a photography curriculum at PAFA. He and his friend Bruce Samuelson, who teaches here now, has been teaching here since the early 70s, and was a classmate of Lynch's, talked about getting cameras together and starting some kind of film experiments. Well, Lynch went and bought a camera, a wind-up camera, and he started to basically do stop-motion animation of a painting he was making. Six Men Getting Sick isn't the moment where there's a crossroads and David Lynch picks film over painting or drawing. It is the first manifestation of what winds up being a total sensory immersion. When you look at what the result is, Six Men Getting Sick, it's a filmed animation that goes on for 60 seconds and it's looped, aimed at a sculpted screen that's 6 by 8 feet. And the animation is basically a painting that he's making, that he gradually adds to, shoots 2 frames, adds to it, shoots 2 frames, and continues to do that. And so he's not making little sort of animated cells or approaching film in the way a filmmaker would. Lynch is approaching film the way he knows how to do any kind of studio work or come up with a solution. He is actually making a painting and filming it as it is transforming, through his gradual additive process.
And I've been painting ever since. And but I get something from painting that I don't get from any other medium, for sure. If you don't know what it is, a sore can be very beautiful. A sore in the skin, an infection, a deep cut with pus, but if you took a picture of it, a close-up, and you didn't know exactly what it was, it could be a great beauty of organic phenomenon.
But he's constantly trying to think of new ways of realizing that idea, and it's a vision of total sensory immersion rather than I am choosing film over painting. It's all together.
I only wanted to be a painter. Painting led to wanting to do a moving painting with sound. So cinema to me is sound and picture moving together in time. And for me, it was born out of painting.
Eraserhead is also this intuitive process that he is making a film in a manner that takes 4 years, partly because of funding, but also because of the nature of the way he's constructing the world. constructed and added to in the way that somebody working in a studio, doing something, putting something in juxtaposition, adding something to it, would do a film, rather than somebody who's shooting a narrative that has a linear sort of trajectory. He wants to constantly remind people that it's a muse. Philadelphia has been his muse, basically.
Up next, we're meeting a photographer as she recalls how she fell in love with taking pictures. It began with a spark and has evolved into a successful career. We'll take a look at her body of work and track how she went from novice to pro.
I started to take pictures when my kids were little. I think what I wanted to do is make sure that I never forgot those moments. And it translated to when we went somewhere and traveled, to take that picture to make sure if I got really, really old and I couldn't remember anymore, I had the picture to look at and remember those moments. I actually fell in love with photography our first trip to Yosemite. I knew what I wanted to get, but I was missing the technique. And actually my husband suggested, you should take classes. And taking classes online, I met my mentor, Jim Zuckerman, and he took me under his wing. I asked him, do I really need to choose? I don't want to choose. Everybody's asking me, are you a landscape photographer? Are you a fashion photographer? What kind of photographer are you? And he said, you don't have to choose. You can be great at all these different things. You just need to go out there and shoot and practice and find your ways. I do landscape photography, and then I also shoot model portfolios and fashion photography for some up-and-coming magazines. With models, I want to bring out their real personalities, not just the external beauty, but it's also who they are as a person. My husband is my #1 fan. That's what he calls himself. He's been very, very supportive. Sometimes I take over the whole house. Sometimes I'm gone for dinner. And my children too. I often use my children as my reflector holders. And as well as my brother. He helped me start in this as well. So my family, they're my #1 supporters. During my trip to Africa, I was able to shoot during sunset on a hill, a cheetah and a lady. This lady owns a lodge there, which is also a preserve, and she rescued 3 cheetahs. And one of the cheetahs has become almost like her pet. I was in awe. It was hard to shoot because it was so emotional. Their relationship, it was incredible. The trust between both of them was just incredible. The colors, everything. I have a whole collection. I couldn't stop shooting because it was so amazingly perfect. Like God said, here's the light, here's the moment, shoot, And that was a very special moment. So that's what I want to transmit, the emotion, that moment. I want to share that moment with people. Having my photography in different galleries, I had a hard time receiving the feedback from the people. I was afraid of that negative comment. Will people like my stuff? Because everybody that said they were amazing was my family or my friends. What are they going to tell me? Oh my God, this is awful. So it was really, really hard. And I stood back and tried to listen. And it was like, oh my God, they really like them. And my family and friends said, we told you. There's a time where your brain starts working differently. You start to see all those things that you were missing before. I think what sets me apart from other photographers is my style, is my passion, is what I see through that camera. You can actually shoot a model. You can have 4 different photographers in the same place at the same time shooting the same model, and all the pictures will look different. I want people to know me through my photography, to get to know who I am. And I'm working really hard at doing that. There's so much to learn, there's so much out there. I think photography is always evolving. There's all kinds that you can try and do, but I never want to get away from the passion that I have from it. Even though I can use new techniques and new ideas, I like to stay with a passion. But always learning from the best to become the best. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
To get closer, visit GabrielaMichaniePhotography.com. Now, let's take a moment to celebrate another Louisiana treasure. So thinly disguised in the novel A Confederacy of Dunces, we'll take a look at that iconic vendor's cart in the shape of a hot dog.
Lucky Dog vending carts have been on the New Orleans landscape since after World War II. In the years since, the company has sold over 25 million hot dogs and has become a Louisiana icon, in large part due to the key plot detail in A Confederacy of Dunces, the 1981 Pulitzer Prize-winning book by John Kennedy Toole. In the novel, Ignatius J. Riley goes to work selling weenies for the fictitious Paradise vendors, wheeling a hot dog-shaped cart through the French Quarter and eating most of the proceeds of his work. Commemorated in Louisiana's Capitol Park Museum in Baton Rouge, today's 7-foot-long push carts are a patented design, updated in the early 80s in preparation for the 1984 World's Fair in New Orleans. They meet modern health codes with double sneeze guards, stainless steel sinks, refrigeration areas, 4 different storage compartments, and receptacles for wastewater and garbage. The carts are equipped with butane heaters to steam hot dogs, buns, and chili to deliver a freshly prepared and convenient fast food. In 1972, in an effort to preserve the historic character of the French Quarter, the city's zoning laws included an ordinance restricting street food vendors to those in operation in the quarter since 1964. Established in 1948, Lucky Dogs is the only hot dog vendor that qualifies.
Our final segment reminds us that in the end, it's all in the family. We meet the grandson of widely celebrated cartoonist, the late Johnny Hart, and learn how the family's carrying his legacy forward. Take a look.
When I was young, I passed the time drawing. Drawing was natural for me. It was something I thought everybody did. It was something I enjoyed. It was something I was kind of good at. I started to take it a little bit more seriously. My name is Mason Mastriani, and I'm a syndicated cartoonist. I was actually born and raised in Endicott, and I went to Shenango Forks High School. I love doing what's fun and knowing that it's, at the end of the day, it's also a paycheck, it's also my living. I love being able to do gestural stuff and write jokes and express myself in this way. Growing up with a legacy like BC. Growing up reading that, feeling like it's part of my family because it is part of my family. All the characters I've known as a child, all the characters are based on real people. My grandfather's friends. My grandfather was such a big part of my life. I love that I have that legacy. My grandfather was Johnny Hart. He was my role model. It's funny, he was a workaholic. He spent most of his time here at the studios. I don't know how to explain the relationship, but we just had this innate ability to understand each other. It's kind of like the same thing I have with my brother Mick. And I only shared that relationship with these two people in my life. We just kind of understand each other. We're a little different. We don't really see the world the same way as what would be considered the norm, I suppose. But working with my family is the greatest blessing and the greatest challenge that I've ever had. My brother and my mother, who I work with primarily, the way that we saw things was so completely different. So we butted heads on everything for about the first year that we worked here, and I mean not in a bad way. I mean we had a great time. We ended up kind of defining our roles, maybe right around year 2, year 3. We've been here for 7 years now, working together, and now it's so smooth, and we have this dividing line between being a family, which we are when we're not in this building, and being co-workers, which we are in this building, and the respect and the ability to bounce ideas off one another is really powerful. It's incredible that it's my living. Such a blessing.
For more information, visit johnhartstudios.com. And that's it for this edition of Art Rocks. Don't forget to visit the website at lpb.org/artrocks, where you'll find feature videos and information on upcoming arts events. Until next time, I'm James Fox Smith, and thanks for watching.